Hello, everybody. I can see that we've reached a calm after a very intense few days, and we're still on the last stretch. There's still a compact that we want to sign that will be in the Tsavo room after this session ends. And then there's the follow-ups that happen this afternoon in the closing session. So I am so grateful that you've taken the time and made the trek to find yourself here in the furthest corner of the campus to be with us today. My name is Kesia Rust, and I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa. We have a base in South Africa. We also have a base in Kenya with Beatrice Mwangi, who's here as well. And we also have colleagues in Dakar in Senegal. And then we have colleagues all over the continent. CAHF is the secretariat to the African Union for Housing Finance, which is an industry body that represents the private sector broadly in affordable housing across Africa. And the focus of this discussion today is to start to think about this question of scalable, sustainable investment in affordable housing, which arises out of partnerships. And partnerships within the African Union for Housing Finance as a body where members have come together to work with one another to present one voice. All of us have individual voices always, but we come together to present one voice to share that into the policy and the lobbying and advocacy environment. And we want to communicate with government. And sometimes that becomes a difficult thing. Either it's that languages are different or that objectives and mandates are different and so on. So in our conversation today, we'll talk about a few mechanisms that we're pursuing. And we hope that it's a discussion with all of you in terms of how do we, in each of our local contexts, in your local contexts, really build these sustainable, scalable approaches for investment in affordable housing through the development of partnerships between the public, the private, and the community sectors. So I would like to welcome our treasurer, Mr. Johnston Olteshia he is the CEO of the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, and he is also the treasurer on the board of the African Union for Housing Finance. Thank you.
Good morning. Hey, good morning. Yeah, I like that. So, welcome back. I know you have had a number of sessions since the conference started on Wednesday. And you might potentially say you're a little overwhelmed with information that we currently have shared. My task this morning is simple. It's essentially just giving some welcome remarks before we go into the discussions that we're going to have. So on behalf of the African Union for Housing Finance, on behalf of the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company that I represent, I welcome you all to this AUHF CAHF side event. As you have heard over the last 2 or so days, housing sits at the center of continental urban agenda, not only as a social priority, but as a question of growth, inclusion, infrastructure, and economic transformation. And in fact, what I'm going to tell you is a lot of already what you've heard over the last 2 days. Of course, we've heard a lot about urbanization in Africa, which I think is the highest in any region. And essentially what we are doing about it is part of the discussion we've been having over the last several days. including part of what we're going to be discussing today. Last year, in October, we hosted the AUHF conference here in Nairobi, and usually after that, we have a statement. So we have what we call the Nairobi statement that was prepared after that conference. And it was mainly about the blended finance for affordable housing, and it's of course coming in as with a clear pathway because it's a practitioner's view. The statement underscores 4 main priorities. I think there were about 6, but I'm just talking about 4. Number 1 is about strong partnership, blended finance as a catalyst, not as a substitute, local currency solutions, and credible pipelines supported by data and project preparation. From us at KMRC, these principles are central to our mandate of crowding in private sector funding, long-term private sector, local currency funding for supporting affordable housing at scale. The reason why I'm saying this is that we do blended finance, or we actually literally apply blended finance because we raise concessional financing from World Bank, African Development Bank, and Government of Kenya, and we blend with capital markets funding. So we issue bonds and we do them blending before we refinance mortgages. What we consistently observe is that when enabling conditions are high or are right, capital response and institutions across the housing value chain can align on delivery. The conversation today is about moving from commitments to implementation, shaping markets, deploying capital, and strategically and building real investment pipelines. Our discussion is also informed by evidence, including the CAHF, African Development Bank report, on mobilizing investment in affordable housing, which will be launched as part of this discussion. Our collective task is to move affordable housing in Africa from pilots to portfolios and from projects to systems. If the African Urban Forum is the platform for shaping continental direction, this side event should help define part of the implementation pathway. And with that, I thank everyone and look forward to the discussion we're going to have ahead of us.
So please, can you put the presentation up? So as Johnson said, we met as an organization last year. We meet every October, November, each year in a different country. And last year we were in Nairobi. This year we will be in Lusaka from the 2nd until the 5th of November. And on the left is the Nairobi statement, and that's available on our website, and then the report that we're going to be launching. So I'll give a brief overview of the AUHF itself and the problem statement that I'd like for us to consider in this discussion here. And then I will be followed by Babati Moketi, and we are delighted to have the African Development Bank here who sponsored the work that was done. And then it's a discussion, and some of you who registered for the event put questions into your registration. We invited you to do that. And those questions are quite fascinating. They come from a range of countries, and we will send those to the colleagues we have in those countries to see if we can answer them. But those will be the subject for the discussion here and anything else that comes up out of it. Just to look first at the African Union for Housing Finance. It's an old organization, 42 years old this year. It was born in 1984, actually in Kenya. It grew out of an initiative, in fact, that was originally funded by USAID, where the 11 different members came together. They were mortgage banks and building societies to discuss how housing finance was moving and growing and developing on the continent. Since then, we've grown quite a bit, and now we're about 70 members in 20 countries. You can see that we have a very strong spread across Southern and Eastern Africa, and we have 4 members in Kenya and 6 in Tanzania, 1 in Uganda. And then we have quite a number of members increasingly now, also in Francophone Africa, and much of our work, we strive to be bilingual. We have members who are banks, developers, prop tech companies, NGOs, academics, individuals, so quite a wide range. And the membership fee, of course, is different depending on the institution. And we have captains of housing as our board members. As I said, Johnston is our treasurer. Our chairperson is Kehinde Ogundimu, who's the CEO of the Nigeria Mortgage Refinance Company. Mildred Mutesa from Zambia, she is the MD of the Zambia National Building Society, is our vice chairperson. That moved very quickly, there we go. And then we have someone from First National Bank, the Mfundo Mabaso from First National Bank, Paul Jackson from TAF, and Habib Han from Shelter Afrique, all who are on the board together. And they drive the affairs of the AUHF. We also focus our work. The main event is our conference, and I'll talk a little bit about that just now. But we have 2 committees, the one which is focusing on lobbying and advocacy and engaging with government, and the other which is focusing on investment support. And this is where we're grappling with how do we have these conversations? How do we take and it's conversations in both ways. If you imagine the membership of 70 members and wanting to communicate on the one hand with government, whether that's at national or at local level, and that would be around enabling environments and the context in which they're working. And then on the other hand, wanting to engage with investors who will support investment and growth. And the AUHF tries to facilitate that, supported by the research that CAHF then undertakes and commissions and disseminates. Our main events are the conferences. Every year it's a different one. So in 2023, we're in Namibia, case studies. And I would invite you to take a look at the website. To take a look at the website to see the presentations, because there's excellent work there. And on our YouTube channel, you can also look at all of those presentations. Then Building to Last was around green and sustainable housing, and that was in Zanzibar. That was our 40th anniversary conference. And then last year, we focused on blended finance. And last year, we had about just under 200 people attending the conference, and they were coming from 28 countries. They included both members and non-members. So it's a great place for discussion, specifically around housing. We have, for the last 3 years, also been convening roundtables. And this gets to the topic of our discussion here, where on the day before the conference, we invite members of the government, and whether ministers or senior officials in the departments. In the first year, we had ministers, vice ministers, or deputy ministers, pardon me, and senior officials to come and speak. That was in Namibia. Similarly, so in Zanzibar. And last year, we also invited central bankers and finance ministers to come and have a discussion, and it relates to the theme. And a good example I can just pull out very quickly is in Zambia, where our member, the Zambia National Building Society, invited their government to come with. And that creates an excellent opportunity for conversation offsite about what are the issues that need to be addressed within the policy space in the country. So last year was the blended finance, and we launched this report on blended finance and affordable housing. It's a playbook that we did together with Convergence to really think about the ways in which you structure a blended finance transaction to achieve a housing investment of different sorts. Okay. Something that we've just launched this year is the AUHF Academy. And we are convening a series of workshops, seminars, webinars, our conference counts. Oops, not touch this. There. Regular sessions that are happening on an ongoing basis. They're open, freely available to the public. But if you are an AUHF member and you attend a certain number in the year, you will be recognized for that at the AUHF conference and given a certificate for that. And we're in the process of working on accrediting this program so that it's something that can be recognized within your countries as well. We are looking at it as a community of practice where colleagues can communicate with one another about what they are doing themselves. So we invite our members to present their experiences in their own organizations and share that with the wider network. And we can do so much of that now because we can do it online as well. Okay, and we invite you to either join us in Benin. We are hoping in June. It's being planned. We're just awaiting a particular date following the elections. And we'll be in Cotonou to speak about blended finance, or to come with us to Zambia, where we are talking about technology and innovation. We're always looking for proposals for people who would like to present if they have a particular innovation that they'd like to share for the Zambian conference, and we would really look forward to seeing you there. There we am I in the right place? Yes. Okay. So just to spend a little bit of time on I'm not winning. On the Nairobi Declaration. And if you want to access it, you can use that QR code to access it. And at the end of every conference, we put together a summary statement of what's been said. That's then circulated to all of the members who give their thumbs up or make amendments. And then that becomes a document that the members circulate within their own networks and their own lobbying agendas. So we will disseminate it ourselves, but then internally, members will also circulate it within their network. Last year's, as I said, was focusing on blended finance. And so the statement begins by saying, we understand the opportunities for blended finance, which leverages public or concessional capital to stimulate private sector investment. And in the context of that, we identified, as Johnson said, a range of interventions, which I'll take you through. But one of the things that came out so strongly, and I think is important for this conversation here too, is that we are constantly, when we're thinking about ways to mobilize capital for affordable housing, we're trying to come up with the best new bright idea. And bright ideas are beautiful, but they don't have track records. And investors are very keen on track records. They like to join something that's proven. And so one of the comments came out, which it gets hidden in our report, but I think it's an important one to recognize, minimizing the continued invention of new models, but actually just solidify the ones we've got. And that, the point, Johnson, that you said at the end about the data frameworks that collect information about the work that we're doing. So we're very keen on innovation. Those of you who know me would know that. But there is also something to be said for stability and certainty. And as an AUHF, what we are trying to do is to communicate a sense of stability to the governments and, well, a need for stability to the governments, but critically stability to the investors so they can trust that the investment that they're making is into a real thing. The call to our governments was specifically to reduce the cost of capital, to look at local mechanisms for managing Forex risk. These are critical things. They're not new. You know them. If I woke you up in the middle of the night, which I promise I won't, but if I did, and I asked you, that you would probably say these without even thinking. We know these are critical, but we do need to say them in concert together to find ways to say, that's the thing we need to fix, that part in the process, to create an enabling environment for urban transformation and to play their regulatory role. So to get the basics right, that's what we want from our governments. And then the statement carries on and engages with a call to government, a call to development finance institutions, private sector practitioners, including ourselves, but also more widely, and then our international partners. And what we're really trying to do is build a conversation that can be reliably attended to by people who are on the outside and want to understand, what does housing look like in Africa, and can I participate? So a big part about, we talk with the magic of mobilizing capital really is providing a stable self, a presentation of a real opportunity that has a track record, that has a verified impact, that you can trust is going to lead to something, and you can rely on that. That's the thing we have to present. Has to be calm and stable, not anxious and screaming. And in that context, that's what we're trying to do with these processes. And then we made our own commitments. And this is an important part, I think, for all of, certainly the members of the AUHF, but for the wider affordable housing sector. We each of us have a critical role to play in creating that sense of stability and trust. And that's by sharing the information that about what we do into the wider community, so that people become familiar with our work and our key performance indicators and the challenges we face, but also the opportunities that we see. So we've committed to document and disseminate lessons. Blended finance transactions, we learned that convergence, which collects data from all blended finance transactions, the whole world, in Africa relating to affordable housing, they have 25. Now they've got so many from so you can understand why a blended finance transaction in housing would be difficult to enter, because there's very little precedent of what it should look like and what works and what doesn't work. And so to document, disseminate lessons where there's been a successful coming together of public objectives and mandates, private objectives and mandates, and development capital as well into that space, and how that worked and what are the mechanisms. And so that's something now that the members have committed to documenting. To provide TA to its membership and more widely, to advocate here for these kinds of things, to foster peer-to-peer learning, to engage investors, and we do that consistently, and then to engage governments. So broadly, this is where we're working towards. And as part of that, as we were building, and as CAHF was working on the report on blended finance, the playbook, which is really directed at the private sector, at deal promoters. How should you structure your deal and bring in the parties? The African Development Bank asked us, well, what about the role of the state in this context? And so I would like to invite Babati, if you would come and let us know what your thoughts and expectations were for this report. This is a new QR code you can download, and this has gone public today. And we'd love to hear Babati Loketi, please. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Kesia. Good morning, everyone. I'm sure, I think most of the points have been spoken to before by the previous, I think, speakers. I hope I'll be a bit short. We did indeed ask CAHF to put up some documentation on saying, how does now the state play in terms of housing? If you look at affordable housing, I think it's one of the untapped market in Africa, mainly due to the fact that we have a risk structuring problem, not necessarily the availability of finance, both domestically or internationally. And you find that if we can create a system that sort of deals with the fragmentation and predictability, and which ultimately leads to it being deemed to be unbankable in most cases. I think from our perspective, we have found that housing is not about building cheaper units currently, or affordable housing is not about building cheaper units, but rather about fixing the 5 key constraints that are a bit systematic, that I think from the bank, we have done a couple of publications. I think the one that recent that we are launching now. We have done also a publication called From Millions to Billions, which was launched at the Africa Investment Forum. We've done the Africa Urbanism Dynamism, through which we did with OECD. I think some of this, they'll be a bit repetitive. First, I think, is the issue of land. You find that in most cases, our cities, the land infrastructure or the land costs accounts for up to 70% of the housing costs. I think yesterday there were some pitches that were presented at a Mentors where we had a few companies that were showcasing the project they are working on. I think there was one which they were indicating that in each unit, they have an extra $15,000, which is just because of the bulk infrastructure. And already $15,000 on an affordable housing, that housing is no longer affordable. So I think those are the things that I think from the government side of things, that land, service land, needs to be availed so that then the housing can become much, much more affordable. The other aspect is the infrastructure itself. Housing, in most cases, I think we look at it in isolation from the transport. So that basically means the transport, the markets, the energy. You find that, yes, I have the housing unit, it's available. But now for me to go to my place of business, the costs that already makes that housing unaffordable, because you find that I might be living in a cheaper house, but the cost that takes for me to reach the market on a day-to-day, I'm now paying 3 times. Then I think people then tend to find themselves living in slums that are closer. I think this is where I think we thought, when we partnered with CAHF, to say we need to have those specific data, specific sectors that we think we can also bring to our governments to say, how do we tackle this? So that, because that is where the role that the government can play in blending these issues of the housing financing. Then I think we have the construction productivity. Currently, the housing deficit stands at, it's estimated at 50 million housing units in Africa. We can never deliver that using the artisanal skills or artisans. So we need to embrace technology, find new ways of industrializing the construction of the housing units. How do we leverage technology? I think there were one of the presentations that were made yesterday, whereby I think there are some fintech solutions that are coming up that are trying to sort of help in this particular space. But now, is the policy legal frameworks, are they conducive enough to allow those fintech to take off and be able to scale? Because I think those are one of the main issues. So it still points back to, I think, governments. I think for the housing finance part, I think as an MDB, we haven't been much more on the supply side, that is the vertical delivery of houses, but we've been more on the demand side. I'm happy to see Kenya mortgage refinance here. I think we did some support to them. The Tanzania mortgage refinance, Nigeria families homes, I think in Zambia as well, even in South Africa, by either providing some support to sort of maybe provide the availability of mortgages so that people can access financing, which is affordable. But I think the key issue is that the financing is there. I think every time I meet PS Hinga is always telling me, yes, you assisted with the mortgage refinance, but I don't have the supply. I need now the product that people can now get the mortgage to be able to say, now I have the house. So I think this is where now I think as governments, how do we avail land that is closer to the marketplaces that then brings the blending aspects of the affordable housing that we want to achieve as a continent. I think now the last bit, I think I spoke about it. The biggest risk I think is mainly the policy and governance. Most of our countries, the land governance, it's still a huge challenge. Investors who comes, it takes forever to do the necessary due diligence. If they want to do it on the private side without necessarily having government. So it still points back to government to say, let's get our policies, let's get our land governance systems in order. I'll give an example with Rwanda. I know the scales might be different. They have a project called the Mbazi Rehousing, which I think was a very good success. What they did, because they've digitized all their land system, they come in this informal settlement, they find Babati, they register his name, how much acreage is occupying. Find Kesia, they do the same thing. Then they say, I'll take an acre, entrust this government, get an investor, or come and develop density from low rise to density. By the next, they move to the next acre. They no longer need to be paying people for rental, but they are rehousing people in the very same space where they found them. But mainly because they have got it right from the land governance, it becomes easier to scale that housing, affordable housing support that they are doing there. Now you find that what comes up, it has all the necessary amenities. You don't run the risk. I was in a session with the deputy governor a few minutes ago, and he was giving an example where they put up some houses in Kibera, but then the people who were living there, they ended up either renting those houses up and still moving in the slums, because for them the issue is when you are rehousing them, you ignored the social fabric that they already had. So I think there's a lot of dynamics or a lot of aspects that as governments, for us to bring in the blending aspect of this to affordable housing that we need to do. I think there's a huge precondition that I think as governments we need to do. I will end in saying, I think from the bank side now, as much as we have not been many involved on the supply side, but more on the demand side, we do have a number of financial products that can come in, whether we provide partial credit guarantees to enable people to scale. Those are aspects that the bank has. Currently, we do have new leadership, new president. We are still undergoing some restructuring, but if you look at his 4 cardinal points, I think mobilizing local resources within domestically is one of his key priorities, and also scaling even the developments, the impacts. How do we impact on the youth? Because now, even when we talk housing, how do we target the youth? Because most of the time, most of the youth, those are the people who would want to start by getting those affordable housing as well. I think with that, I would say, Kesia, I would end there, and maybe we move on to the next session, and we see how either there are either further questions that we can discuss and answer on the panel. Thank you very much, Kesia. Yeah.
This is a discussion document, and you haven't read it now. But we really wish to have a discussion with you, and we would really welcome your feedback. I know that that's an issue also for the African Development Bank, and the intention is, as a discussion document, we're wishing to solicit feedback And then we'll take it to the next step, which would be a playbook of sorts, that then can be a way in which we can engage with governments about how they should be playing their role within a blended finance transaction. And so your feedback in terms of how government also might assist you in that transaction. Take a look at that section 4, and then the section 5, and read it together with the other report on blended finance, and we would really welcome your comments and thoughts. What we did do, though, and now I'd like to invite everyone into discussion now, is we asked this audience and a range of other people who all registered for the event to say what are the questions that they would like government to answer. And at the risk of outing you, and forgive me, are there any government officials in this room right now? There we go. We have a municipality from South Africa in the back. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself?
I do. But entirely. Okay, thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation made so far. I'm Bomusa Zondo, the Chief Strategy Officer from the City of Durban, Etegwini Municipality, and we are here in attendance with the political leaders, Councillor Mkize, as a co-chair for a housing portfolio committee, Councillor Ntando Kuzwayo, co-chair for governance committee, the CEO of the municipality, we call them city managers in Etegwini in South Africa, Bomusa Mpele, the director of adequate housing, Lawrence Pato. I'm a director of strategy in the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. Are there any other representatives from government? No. You may well have to speak for all governments in Africa. Are there any representatives from development finance institutions, agencies? We have the Rwanda Development Bank. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Kesia. Good afternoon or good morning. I don't know what time is it. My name is Lizette. I'm from the Development Bank of Rwanda. I run a project called Rwanda Housing Finance Project, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm also called Eric Muhirwa. I work with Development Bank of Rwanda, and I work as a special analyst in housing investment.
Thank you so much. And you're with KMRC is a DFI of an agency. You're connected with government.
Yeah, so my name is Joe from KMRC, or Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company. KMRC is a quasi-government institution. We call it a PPP here. It's predominantly private, 75% private owned, 25% government. And so, yes, we have government linkages. So we obviously work together with DFIs and government institutions. And we have lots of questions, and I don't know who is going to answer them.
Well, exactly. So we're also running short on time because the compact is about to start. It's the same conversation that we'll carry to, but let me show you the questions. And I wonder if any of these questions we received came from, you saw Kenya, Ghana, Uganda, Mali, Zambia, South Africa, Nigeria, Somalia. Okay, and next slide there. Various questions around how will policy keep up with local context. And that, I think, goes straight to Durban, the city of Durban, just to take note that there are the questions that are being asked are saying, well, how does a policy relate to my immediate environment as it appears in a particular neighborhood? There are some questions around green, the status of policies on decarbonizing housing construction, some questions on construction and on tracking progress, and that's all under the heading of policy regulatory framework. Any comments on this? Any other issues that are of interest in this context?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. My name is Joshua Adem. I work with the religious organizations working on settlements. And in that, the issue of policy, strategy, and regulation framework, I still have a concern. My concern is whereby the relocation and resettlement, I don't see it covered in the framework, because here is where the conflict comes. And this one in the future also, we see that the reemerging again of slums or informal will come up. Because when these people are not relocated well, whereby they are facilitated as they relocate, and then they are resettled, they might resent to coming back to the same establishment where they left. So I could see there's a gap there to come up with a policy for resettlement and relocation. So that is the gap I've seen in that area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that that was covered under the land infrastructure and informal settlements question. Yes, Dorothy.
I think when we're talking about, my name is Dorothy Baziwe and I am from Uganda, from an NGO called Shelter and Settlements Alternative. I think mine goes to the policy and legal frameworks. I think we need to talk about also the integration of different government policies and programs and institutions, because where we come from, we have, they're not necessarily directly government bodies, but they're bilateral companies that are also supporting and influencing development in a country like the Uganda Development Agency. And these also have to be at play when it comes to housing finance and infrastructure projects. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I mean, I think that that's something that's come up in the past few days, where very many ministers and members of their delegations have said that housing cuts across so many different sectors and agencies. It's inconvenient from a consultation perspective. It would be nice if you just had to have one conversation, but we can't. And so to develop our mechanisms so that the communication is across those agencies is a very, very good point. Can you put the slides back up, please? Thank you. There were questions that are relating to land and infrastructure about the disputes. That's a question that came from Somalia. Sustainability, climate, and urban services relating to alternative building technologies. I have to confess that when we received these questions, I was quite astonished at how specific the questions were from people who really wish to ask their governments these questions. So we will put together lists for each country and send that to those within those governments that we are connected with, to engage around that. Are there any other comments on this slide? Pardon me.
Thank you, Program Director. I just wanted to comment on, we talked much on the land and infrastructure, including informal settlements, but we seem to be having a challenge in terms of the people that occupy spaces, and the PI Act seem to be taking us back. We know it was developed for right reasons, but now some people do settle in areas where they're not even supposed to be settling in, and they take us to court, and we have to find them alternative accommodation. And that has taken us back. And I know there's legislations matters that are being addressed, but it's something that I think we should capture on in going forward with it. And lastly, on my side, I did not see anything that talks about ABT innovation, especially given the time that not only brick and mortar can solve our problem, as it takes time, but if we can have that, the alternative building technology. Thank you.
Excellent. And just by way of explanation, the PI Act is a South African legislation, the Prevention of Illegal Eviction Act, and it broadly requires that if somebody needs to be evicted, alternative accommodation needs to be found, and that becomes an additional step in the process. It was certainly established to respect land rights and tenancy rights, but it has become a difficult requirement to navigate in South Africa. Did you want to add something to that, sir?
Yeah, I mean, the point I wanted to maybe add on the question of partnering for improve delivery on adequate housing. I mean, there's a question raised, but I think there will be a need that we also reflect on the practices that we have seen across the continent, where people themselves work together to save, to build themselves shelter somewhere, and how that then could be supported through the financing approaches that understand that when there is, even if it's not necessarily a legal entity, but at least help those that have come together to save, that they are able then to access particular funding in a way that does not add burden of tax or interest that may be then leverage over a particular loan that may be entered to with a particular finance house. The second part there is that how do we allow communities themselves working with organized civil society and universities, and I'm looking at Professor Edgar here, that he may also maybe at a point where they even work together to design the layout of how they see their community in the future. And then from there, work with their government to deliver on that aspiration. That may be another important way. And we have seen it in some occasions, including Kenya here, Mungano and others, slum dwellers affiliates, working with communities themselves and putting up plans and equally fundraise and have professionals, professional support and support to propose particular plans to government themselves, and equally commit on what they will bring to the table for that realization of that dream. I think we also need to put that as we discuss this document moving forward until its final legislation process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, can you put the slides up? And I need to close. The next session has come in. Edgar, a question was posed to you. I don't know if you want to deal with that afterwards, perhaps, hey? We've recorded it. We'll come back to you so we can make a direct feedback. But it's a good question. So to move to, I just wanted to highlight one last thing. I'm sorry we've run out of time. But next one, there we go. We run two WhatsApp groups, one in English and one in French, and we would welcome you to join them. It's a great place for exchange around what's happening in housing across the continent. It's driven by all of you. There are rules. We talk about housing, but it's a very lively set of discussions, and there's lots of information all day long. And so I'm going to close this meeting and thank you all very much for joining. Apologies to the next session for having gone over a little bit. And I would like all of you to please contact us. We're at the African Union for Housing Finance. You can speak with Beatrice or myself, or you'll find us on our websites or even via the WhatsApp group, and join the conversation so that we can take these issues forward. We'll respond to the questions that you've raised, and look forward to receiving more from you as well. I hope you've got that, because I'm going to put, that's all of us. Yes.
Thank you. And please, I just want to make one final comment. You may please join us in Lusaka, Zambia, for the African Union for Housing Finance conference, which will be in 2nd to 5th November. Most of these discussions we have a pre-session for governments and financiers, and that we can actually be able to have people in the room to respond to most of the questions that we have here. Thank you.